Hello everyone, welcome to Res Snapper. My name's MJ and today we're talking about plug and play cards. What does it mean and what are they? Well, plug and play, this is a term that I first heard on Cozy and Alex's Snapchat. This is a weekly Marvel Snap podcast, and because I've heard them first coin the term, I didn't want to make this video without shouting them out, so you should go check it out. It's one of my favourite pieces of Marvel Snap content that I look forward to each week. So plug and play cards, what are they? They are cards who synergize broadly with the game, and you don't need any specific kind of deck to use them. They just plug and play, they fit into anything. So before I go through the criteria that I've used to determine what a plug and play card is, and the list of plug and play cards at each cost, please subscribe. If you go on to enjoy this video, hit that button. We're on the way to 2,099 subscribers as of time of recording, and you're not going to want to miss the very special video that we've got coming soon. We've also got a plug and play tier list coming as well. One quick note on when you should use plug and play cards. You can't fit plug and play cards into every deck because some kinds of decks have deck building restrictions. For example, Cerebro and Mr. Negative, they require very specific and very certain types of cards for the entire deck to function. So if you're brewing, if you're cooking, and you're looking for that little 5 cost that you need to just even out your curve, this is when you can then look at the plug and play cards. And my list of plug and play cards is subjective. I know that there's definitely going to be some controversial choices in here, so I just wanted to clarify the sort of rules that I've considered when compiling this list. So first of all, the card's ability has to not be specific to one archetype. So for example, that disqualifies Meek, who is very firmly a discard card. Also, the card has to not have any special requirements to playing it. So whilst you might consider a card like Ms. Marvel to be a good plug and play card, and she is indeed a good card, because you have to play specific cards in specific locations to get her ability to work, that's why she's not going to fit into just any old deck. You need to specifically work towards that ability. Also, the card has to generally be good, so that disqualifies someone like Adam Warlock, although like I say, I do think I've got some controversial picks in here, so I welcome your comments below. And finally, now this one is very interesting. I've really constructed this list thinking about cards that aren't awkward to play and that generally you don't have to hold them in your hand. A card like Shadow King is absolutely one of the best cards in the game. But because so many cards in Marvel Snap gain power, and because Shadow King is a card that really want to hold on to until the end of the game, these are awkward restrictions. It's awkward to play Shadow King alongside all other cards, or lots of other cards, I should say. That's why I haven't considered some of those more specific and strategic tech cards. So it's time to look at the actual cards. Let's start off with 1 energy. Echo has a great element of control to her. She forces your opponent to play into different locations that they may not want to do, and generally she's just a very good and very undervalued card. It can sometimes be hard to fill out every turn of energy in the game, so Sunspot makes sense in a lot of decks because it can grow to 3-4 power, which is above average for a 1-cost card. Spider-Ham is extremely frustrating. It can single-handedly win games just from being played. Nebula is a great card. It puts lots of pressure on your opponent to play into a specific location, and it can snowball and get out of hand. Iceman freezes a card in your opponent's hand, and similarly to Spider-Ham, can shut down a winning strategy like that. Korg, if played early, getting that rock into your opponent's deck is going to be frustrating no matter what, and that can ruin their draw, and that can be extremely impactful no matter what deck they're playing. Maria Hill is an interesting one, and I think she might be a controversial one, but I think resource generation, as we'll talk about in some of the upcoming cards as well, is so important in Marvel Snap. We spoke about Sunspot and about how he absorbs the energy that you haven't used. Well, Maria can help you in a different way because she can help you to spend that energy, and also she can help with an element of unpredictability. Nightcrawler is good because he can get into locations that are difficult to reach, and also has a broad location synergy. For example, locations that increase a card's power, you can soak up that energy or that benefit or that buff with Nightcrawler and then ship it on out to a different location. And my last 1 energy card is Snow Guard. It's that resource generation that we spoke about with Maria Hill, but also location control is really powerful as well. I actually want to add one energy card to this list, and that is Silver Sable. She's literally just come out, so that's why she's a little addendum onto this bit, but she's very strong, gaining +2 power and then afflicting -2 power to the top card of their deck. So it has this like 2-pronged attack, and she's just generally incredibly strong, and that fits into any deck. Moving on to 2-cost cards. Jeff is great for basically the same reasons as Nightcrawler, but he can get into even more locations, so more difficult to reach locations, and also he's less fragile because Nightcrawler can be killed by Killmonger. Kate Bishop is a very recent card to the game, and again it's this resource generation, and we found that she's just got great utility and great flexibility. Speaking of resource generation, Cable has got a flavour of this, but also a very crucial element to Cable is that he gives you information. For example, I always like using this example when I'm talking about Cable, but Silver Surfer. If you're playing against, I should say, a Silver Surfer deck, and you steal their Silver Surfer, you know that they don't have their winning strategy, and so that gives you great snap equity. You can snap, and they don't know what you've done. Daredevil, I think, is going to be another controversial one, but just generally speaking, yes, you do lose a little bit of tempo by playing just a 2-power card. However, the information that you get on turn 5, knowing their turn 5 play, can be absolutely crucial, especially when you've got tech cards in your deck, like, for example, Shang-Chi or Red Guardian. Scorpion is a great early favourite, can have a massive impact on your opponent's hand, and can make them think twice about playing some of the cards that they may have intended to play. White Widow is another fairly recent card to the game, as of time of recording, and she is very powerful. She gives your opponent a -3 Widow's Kiss that, yes, it becomes a 0-cost card if they fill their location. But again, it's this element of control, and also Clog, which is very strong and powerful and bloody annoying. Moving on up to 3 energy cards, and let's talk about Polaris. She is a card that I used to play in almost all of my decks just because she was so strong as a 3/5. She's one of the few 3/5s in the game. Now, there's lots of other 3/5 statted cards, so why should you play Polaris? Well, she can be a surprising card. Clog is a particularly powerful and potent archetype in the game these days as well, and there's lots of locations which create tokens, for example Savage Land, and Polaris can help to clog a location. She's relatively cheap at 3 cost to be able to have such a big impact on the game. Next up is Copycat, who copies the ability from the bottom card of your opponent's deck, knowing that they're probably not going to draw that card. First of all, that's again this information element that we talked about, similar to Cable, but also you get a very well statted card at 3/5 and probably a really good ability, because generally speaking your opponent is going to have good cards in their deck. Nocturne is great for similar reasons to Nightcrawler and Jeff. The ability to recompose, I don't know why I said that, but reposition your cards and redistribute your power, that's really strong, but Nocturne has a great element to her in their location, I didn't know what to say there, the location control. She can turn off Limbo, which can be very surprising. Hope Summers is one of the best ramp cards in the game. Most ramp cards have a downside to them. For example, Electro limits you to playing 1 card per turn. Hope doesn't have that restriction, and she couples really well with move cards, but even just outside of move decks, even having that extra 1 energy on 1 single turn can be extremely impactful. Coulson, Agent Coulson, we spoke about it already. It's the resource generation. The level of unpredictability and being able to fill out your curve is great. Luke Cage, there's a decent number of locations in the game which have a negative power attached to them, to the cards that you play there. So Luke Cage can be a great way to combat those locations, and also just in general, Affliction is becoming a more popular archetype in the game with more cards that can afflict negative power on you, and Luke Cage stops all of that from happening. Cassandra Nova, she herself afflicts negative power onto your opponent's deck, and she's just extremely strong. She is a good value card and has a very high impact. Phastos, again, going to be a controversial one, I think, but generally speaking, if you can get Phastos out on turn 3, it has such a huge impact on your deck. Almost all decks will appreciate or benefit from their cards being reduced in cost or increased in power. Red Guardian is one of the best tech cards in the game because currently, it's one of the only things that can actually stop your opponent from activating cards. If you whack out that activation before they've activated it, that can be very damaging, but just in general, it's also a way to counter low power cards that your opponent is playing. And finally, Mobius M. Mobius, just a generally good tech card. There's lots of cost reduction in the game, especially with cards like Mockingbird, who is one of the most popular cards in the game. And Mobius can just completely scarper their plans. Let's talk about 4 energy cards and the probably best plug and play card that you can possibly put in your deck, and that is Shang-Chi. Now, you may remember my rules said that I didn't really want to feature cards where you need to hold on to them or that are awkward to play. And whilst that definitely applies to Shadow King, I don't think that applies to Shang-Chi. Yes, you do need to hold it often until the end of the game. However, it is such an impactful and such a powerful card that if you have a spot for Shang-Chi, I would just put him in. I would put him in almost any deck. Gwenpool is another great card that I really enjoy. She squirts extra power into your hand, and generally speaking, 4/6 is not a power level that we get excited about. But buffing up those cards in your hand and then being able to capitalize on that extra power is very good and just generally a great plug and play option. Okay guys, I think viewers would have actually turned off this video when they saw 2 of the cards from my 4 energy options here, and that is Jessica Jones and Rescue. Yes, am I coping? Quite possibly, but these are just generally decent power. They get to 9 power, so generally it's above average. It is above average for a forecast. Now, yes, each of them do have specific requirements, but what I would encourage you to do is consider, with the deck that you've created, consider if Jessica Jones or Rescue makes sense. They can be surprisingly potent, and actually, a card like Rescue works particularly well with this final forecast card, which is Captain Marvel. You can play that Captain Marvel down to boost up the Rescue, and then at the end of the game, maybe Captain Marvel will redistribute that power to somewhere where you need it. We're starting to get thin on the ground as we reach the 5 energy cards, and my first one is Iron Man. Iron Man is a very daunting card to play against because he doubles the power in the location, and once you play that out, that alone could put your opponent off of wanting to try and compete for that location. And just generally speaking, it's a very intimidating and very powerful effect. Claw has a very high power of being able to add 8 power to the location to the right. And overall that means his total power output is 12, which is pretty good just as a base output for a 5-cost card. And is split amongst locations as well. And you have the extra benefit of being able to reach potentially difficult locations and some decent location synergy as well. Now, location synergy, let's talk about Legion. A massive surprise card. This is, again, a big cube stealing card, so you can really benefit from tricking your opponent very early on if you've got Legion in your hand and you've got a clearly defined path where you think, okay, I can actually literally just straight up win the game with Legion. That is so strong, and that ability to have such a big impact on the playing field makes him great in virtually any deck. And finally, Vision. Again, we've spoken about lots of move cards. It's that ability to get into difficult locations and redistribute that power, which is so potent and particularly powerful on a card such as Vision, who has 8 power. And it's very unpredictable for your opponent. Finally, the 6-cost cards. We start off with Doom. 15 total power, adding lots of power across the board. Works great with cards like Sandman or Ms. Marvel, who is not a plug and play card. But just generally speaking, a great card. And similar to Ultron. Also, watch out for Washington DC with these cards as well. That's a snap condition for these cards. Because, of course, drones and Doom bots have no ability. Ultron himself, very, very strong with 8 power and adding 4 1/2 drones to each other location, unless there's other cards there, which obviously it won't add 4, it will add as many until it fills them. This Ultron section's well worded, isn't it? Anyway, you know what I mean, he's just good. And I actually like putting him in many decks, even decks where you wouldn't initially think that it works. Like, I like playing them in the Silky Smooth style decks. Mockingbird is one of the best cards in the game, as I mentioned earlier, because generally speaking, in this new meta, this new world we're in, where there's lots of clog cards, lots of clog options, it means cards are coming across to your side of the field often. Not only that, but there's also plenty of locations which add cards to your side of the field. And so all of these cards reduce Mockingbird's cost, and she's just a generally good option. Red Hulk is one of the strongest cards in the game and has the extra element of being intimidating to your opponent. They see that power growing when they don't fill their energy, and it makes them wary about playing individual locations, or they may be doing the maths, the calculations. They may be going, well, if they play Red Hulk, I can't win that location. So generally a good option if you need something with high, strong power. Similarly, Magneto, strong, high power, and a very good option if you are lacking like a big tall thing. But also, crucially, has this disruption element to him. So this can really, with like destroy decks, sucking away that venom from their Arnim Zola play can feel really good. So there's lots of ways to win with Magneto as well. And finally, the last card is, I think some of you will be surprised to see this one as well, because it's Emperor Hulkling, one of the newest cards to the game. And listen, I don't actually think that he's a brilliant or amazing card. So maybe he kind of breaks my own rules in that you have to be a good card. But then maybe Jessica Jones and Rescue did that already. But I think with Hulkling, generally speaking, he can be a good option. He can create fun moments. So if you need something with high power, yeah, sure, you can put him in. There often are better things. But Hulkling can be fun, maybe. What do you think, guys? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it's useful. Stay tuned, because coming up in several weeks, because I'm going on holiday very shortly, so I'm not going to be able to make videos. But in several weeks, we're going to have a tier list of all of these cards. So what are the best plug and play cards in the games? Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.